Hey EJ, taking a look at this week's assignment. Hopefully you were able to do the frame offset thing on your reference to get it synced up like you want. But let's take a look at this. We'll go into it shot by shot, okay? So looking at this first part here, I'm not sure if you were able to get the hand switch to IK. I think that was one of the things that maybe was causing some issues with that screen right hand. Yeah, but anyways, let me know if you have issues with that, and we can take a look at your model and rig specifically and see if there's an IK-FK switcher. There probably is. I think it looks like you're already switching some of this stuff from IK to FK. But let's talk about some of these poses here. Cool. So one of the things I think that we can clean up maybe is the gun hand, the hand with the weapon in it, because here it's like down by her side, which is cool. I don't have like an opinion on where it should be specifically, but here it like kind of jumps screen left, right? So if we take a look at this with ghosting on, we'll see it moves from like here right up to here, and then on the next pose it jumps kind of like back down to here, right? So I think it probably would make a lot more sense and be a little less distracting if on this second pose, instead of jumping up there, it would be more of like an in-between and maybe like an ease in to this movement here, you know what I mean? So that it can kind of move not in lockstep with her body, but kind of in the same kind of general direction and everything as her cog. So I really like this, how she's like bending down and like pivoting out forward. So let's see. I would love to see a breakdown here where she's kind of like starting to lead with her head first. So we'd start to see some rotation at the neck right here, and then we could start to see some, like the crown of her head would start to tip down. She would lead into this motion with her head and neck before her torso follows along like it does here, which would be cool. And then even it would be nice if her torso precedes her cog, you know what I mean? So we're breaking this down and doing it like with some overlap and everything in mind, right? And what's following and all that, so that it's gonna feel like a bit more natural. And I'm not saying follow these drawings exactly or anything like that. They're just to like communicate an idea. Oh, that's a horrible drawing. Horrible. Anyways, the idea is though that we're leading with the head neck, and then the last thing to kind of move is the cog. And I wonder if we can see you doing that in your reference, because you can see in your reference how little your cog is moving relative to like here. You can even break it down in your own sync sketch session. We can see, whoops, sorry, that's not the right tool. That's not the right tool. Oh my gosh, how in the world? Here we go. All right, so you can see in your reference here, and this is a great use of reference, that if this is what your head's doing, then your torso, right, and then your center of gravity here, like we can see how much more if we turn on ghosting now, we'll see how much more like everything's moving and your center of gravity is moving the least. And also you can kind of see, because of that, like by the time you're here, well, maybe, I don't know, now looking at your reference, you kind of drop your cog into place almost at the same time. So how does that compare to what we're seeing here? Yeah, so maybe it's just, maybe what I'm reacting to is how much movement there is on your cog to get here. You know what I mean? Maybe we try to move the cog less and have the torso like lean over more. You know what I'm saying? Like kind of like what is happening in your reference, where here it feels like almost the cog has moved just as far as your torso has in this character. Because something about this feels like pretty broad and not, it's like sneaky and creepy, like creeping up on the corner, kind of like what you're doing in your reference. So I'm not saying you have to follow your reference exactly, but there's something that feels just a little more authentic about what your what the mechanics are in your reference than what's happening in your piece here. Also, I'm noticing here, like your arm stays pretty straight, and maybe there's some foreshortening and stuff happening here, but maybe, you know, does your hand stick to the same place on the wall in your reference? It kind of like slides down, you know, so maybe you want to emulate that same thing here. With your pieces, instead of trying to have the elbow stick and having to get her torso so far away from the wall, you could leave it closer. Not sure. This is nice. There's a lot of weird spacing things happening between this pose, and this pose. Like if you look at what your cog does, you move forward and then you rotate back and then it jumps up. So I would think that you would want to come here into this pose or something similar to this pose and then hold this a little bit instead of like jumping back immediately like this, and then also this popping up doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Yeah, and then here I want to see if this, how does this compare to your start pose? Yeah, that seems fine. Like she's gained some height, but I think it's fine to gain some height. It shows maybe like an increased alertness or something like that. Maybe we can do something, I don't know. Yeah. So anyways, that's what that's where I'll leave it on this intro part. I feel like there's a lot of stuff that maybe can be cleaned up here happening. Like I don't understand why the top of this torso is tipping over this way. I would take that out and just have it be a more contiguous movement from here to up here, you know. So like if this is your torso and your center of gravity here and your head in this pose, and this is where we're coming from here with the center of gravity and the torso and the head. That's a little too many drawings, I think. Let's clean this up. Huh, not enough drawings, sorry. Let me get this dialed in. Okay. Yeah, so I think for this pose, my suggestion would be to have the cog be almost where you want it to go. You know what I mean? Have the torso still trailing a bit, the head trailing, but it can just be kind of like a more simple move here. Instead of, there's a lot of like chatter going on between those two poses. So yeah, keep working on that, make progress on that. Let's look at the next bit of phrasing here. This kind of surprises me here because her back isn't against the wall anymore, so this pose may need to be modified where you actually have her back against the wall, and we're seeing, like, you know, you want to keep her head in here and all that so that we can see her glancing down to the thing. But is there a way to get her back against the wall while still making room for the canister behind? You know what I mean? Because here it looks very much like she's pressed up against the wall, and then here we're seeing like all of this space between her and the wall, and that feels like a lack of continuity or something. So again, I feel like how this has to go, I think I've made this comment before, where the head looks down. Step one, the head. Step two, the hand, like anticipating the grab. Step three, the grab of the canister. And right now, what I'm seeing is this kind of all happens at once. Like she looks down and the head pulls out the can. The head looks down as the canister comes out from behind her back. So we don't, somehow we're going from like the hand being here to the hand already being behind her back. So we're not like making this really clear for our audience, like what's happening. And this is like kind of a significant story point of like where this stuff comes from, like where this canister is coming from. And like, you know, it'd be great to see her have like a moment here, like I was talking about before, where she's like almost like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And she's like, aha, I know what I'm going to do. And that kind of can motivate the cut here to this shot here, right? We can even have that step, you know, the 1, 2, 3 of the head looking to the spot. That could even be here in this shot, but that needs to be like the narrative progression. So maybe here, step one is where she looks towards her belt, and then it's fine if we're cutting into this shot with her already looking towards her belt, because we've already shown her kind of have that thought process about like, yeah, I know how to solve this problem of this guard, right? But we need to somehow communicate these steps in like a clear manner. So 1, 2, 3. I feel like this is important. And then we pull out the canister. I don't think we need to pull it out in this shot, like I've said before, because we're kind of pulling it out in this shot. So we don't need to pull it out twice. But here we're not going to be able to get a good look at the canister because of how she kind of is grabbing it, and that we're seeing more her hand than the canister. So I like us going to this shot here. So maybe this is just a grab, and then she starts to pull it out. Maybe she gets like this far before we cut to this one, to make it flow better. You know what I mean? But this is also going to need like a full mechanics pass, because right now there's like this part of her rig is totally frozen in space, and there's no keep alive on it, or there's no, it's like pixel locking. There's no reaction to what's happening with her reaching and like grabbing this thing and starting to pull it out. I'm not seeing anything up here in the clavicle as she like raises up her arm and stuff like that. So this needs like a legit full mechanics pass on this part here on her torso and even her cog. Just some kind of something to keep the pixels from being frozen in space. So we have to do this narrative 1, 2, 3 beat. Either like she's thinking like, what do I do? What do I do? Aha! I know. I'm going to throw the audience's attention down to, I'm going to look down here to throw the attention down to the belt. Then we're here. The hand goes up, prepped to grab the thing. You know what I mean? I grab the thing and I start to pull it out, which motivates the cut to here, where we see the canister come up into frame. So let's talk about this shot here, where the canister comes up. It feels like we have a big overshoot, which kind of keeps, and a long settle. I would minimize the overshoot and try to keep the canister on frame. So overshoot it less, maybe just to like here, maybe have this be, and it would be a smaller overshoot, and then it settles down here. You know, so maybe overshoot no more than 147. Let me do that better so it's more legible. And then the timing from 147 like down to here feels fine. Like this is good. And then for as long as it takes the audience to process whatever it is that we're looking at, right? Then this feels okay. So moving on to the next shot. That's feeling a lot better as far as like what's happening, like the torso. You settle down the torso, which is great. On this, I think we need to get, again, like the other shot, we need to have this motion represented in more than just purely in the arm. Like there has to be something also happening in the shoulder, and that would give us just a little bit of something happening here. You know what I mean? In the torso, so all this like isn't frozen, and then the head would probably be being pulled like with some you know, secondary action. So if the torso jerks this way just a little bit, I'm talking about just like this much, like a few degrees, the head would probably like stay in place just for a tiny bit, and then it would have to like a few frames or a few poses later, it would also probably follow in kind, just being like a tiny bit reactive. So all of this should feel like alive and connected. If we're just doing like these violent shakes on the arm and there's nothing more happening on the rest of the body, it's not going to feel like good mechanically. So I want you to take a pass at that and try to think about fully animating this shot and not just doing like this limited animation style of just one part or one segment of the character. The same thing here is like when she raises up, having this gun be completely like locked and frozen in screen space really reveals that it's like an IK hand, and that's not how reality works. Is like to hold an object perfectly in space is something that only like mimes can do with extensive training, you know. That's not really what's going on here. So as she raises up, it's nice to have the gun drag a little bit, but the gun should also raise up with her as she's doing that. This is a nice anticipation from this pose to this pose, but it's all kind of happening simultaneously. So maybe again, like what we need to do is anticipate, like lead a little bit with the torso before the cog follows along, you know. And if we're leading with the torso, we may want to, you have to choose if you want to lead with the head. Maybe it makes more sense here to like drag the head a little bit, leaving it a little bit behind in space. I don't know why I drew her in profile, but like lead with the upper torso and then have the cog catch up You know what I mean? Um, and then yeah, the same is going to be true of the throw. Like we have to try to do what we can to like break up this all feeling kind of like locked together, like the torso and the cog feels kind of locked there. And then yeah, yeah. All right, let me get to the last little bit here of the reload. That's nice. I felt like there's been a lot of good work put in here. Yeah, so I would just focus on those other bits of the anim for now, for sure. And yeah, keep trying to make as much progress moving forward as you can. I think that like it's getting really nailed and locked down. So I'm happy to see your progress. Keep pushing forward. Keep a close eye on the calendar and how much time you have left on this. I think that it's going to require a bit more time than than you know than maybe what you've been able to put in the past. So let's figure out how to make that happen. And yeah, I look forward to seeing your progress and see you in class.